Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Alice Maggio. I'm the Director of Programs at the Schumacher Center for New Economics in Great Barrington, Massachusetts in the United States. And I'm also the Executive Director of Berkshares. And I want to tell you today about some of our grassroots work that we've been doing in the last couple of years. And so I'm going to focus mostly on some of our educational programs, but our executive director of the Schumacher Center and the founder of Berkshares is also at the conference, and she's going to be talking more about the long-term vision of Berkshares on Friday. So you can look for the session with Susan Witt on Friday if you want to learn more about Berkshares. But I did think that we should start off with a little bit about Berkshares to give you some background. Okay. So Berkshares are a local currency in the Berkshire region of Massachusetts. And if you don't know where that is, this is Massachusetts, and all the way on the western end, that yellow county is Berkshire County. So it's a very rural area in Massachusetts. It's far away from the center of the government of Massachusetts, which is in Boston. And so we've long been kind of independent and had to fend for ourselves in a way because there are very few people, and we're far away from Boston, so we kind of get forgotten about sometimes, and our needs are not always met by the programs coming out of Boston. So Berkshares are structured as a nonprofit organization that is a place-based, democratic organization with membership dues, and anybody who pays a membership, anybody who's from the region can become a member, and it's affordable to become a member, and then they can vote for the board or they can run for the board. And that is the organization that issues Berkshares, the currency. So if you go and get Berkshares, you can actually, we have them available at 4 different banks. Those are the banks down there, all community banks in the Berkshire region. And if you go with dollars in your hand, you get Berkshares. 95 cents will get you 1 Berkshire. And then if you go back with Berkshares in your hand, 1 Berkshire will get you 95 cents. So we've set it up so that you can, basically you're depositing your dollars into checking accounts owned by Berkshares, and you're getting Berkshares out as a receipt. You can then spend them. So community bank, the reason I call them that is because there are different structures. These 4 different banks actually have different structures, but they're all based in the Berkshires, and they don't have a presence outside. They're local banks. And so some of them call themselves community banks. Lee Bank is a mutual. Salisbury Bank is publicly traded, but it's still pretty small. Adams, I think it's a mutual. It used to be a savings bank. Actually, it merged. And then the co-op is a co-op. So they all have slightly different structures, but their focus is always on the Berkshire region. So we've really, having them has been at the center of our program, and it's been a really big part of our success because they are the access points for consumers to go get Berkshares. And they're, of course, right downtown in all of our little spread out rural towns, and they have downtown presences, so we don't have to open up an office in every town. Then you can go, once you get your Berkshares, you can go spend them at any of our 400 participating businesses. And there you can spend them as if they were dollars. So 1 Berkshire can be spent as if it was $1 at any of those participating businesses. There are service providers, there are producers, there are farmers, there are excavators and dentists, all sorts of different businesses that take Berkshares. And this is in a region where there are only 130,000 people. And for a long time, we were really focused in just a region of about 20,000 people. Just recently, we've added that 4th bank, Adams Community Bank, which gives us some more reach. So we're starting to expand northward into the rest of Berkshire County. So Berkshares were launched in 2006. This is a picture from our 10th anniversary last September. And I think that in the last couple of years, we've been thinking about and starting the conversation about what are Berkshares? Are they just a local currency focused on local businesses, locally owned businesses? Because that's what our messaging was at the very beginning. We really were known as a buy local discount note. You would bring in 95 cents, you get Berkshire, you can spend your Berkshire as if it was $1, so you're getting a 5% discount for spending your money with locally owned businesses. And that was kind of our identity, and that's what we sold ourselves as. That's what we were about. But I think 10 years in, everybody in the Berkshires kind of has the buy local already in their head a little bit. And so we want to think about, and this has always been the long-term goal, but how can Berkshires be more of a tool for community economic development in the Berkshires, and people-driven community economic development? That's part of why it's really important that a nonprofit, place-based organization is the issue of Berkshires. So we go from just the kind of recirculating money within the region message, and we want to start talking about some other aspects of the potential of Berkshires. And so really, I think that you can, when you go to Susan's talk on Friday, she'll talk a lot more about the theory and the big picture, long-term goal of Berkshires. But at the heart of it is really to support basically more self-sufficiency in the region. And how can we produce more for ourselves, and how can we use Berkshires, a currency, as a tool to do that? Oops. So we take a lot of our inspiration from this woman, Alana Probst, who she actually took a seminar with the Schumacher Center way back in the 80s. And she was the head of a neighborhood economic development corporation in Eugene, Oregon. And as the head of that organization, she was often fighting the effects of poverty, and they had a timber industry in that region, and then there was a big, the timber industry kind of fell apart in the 80s. So the main industry of that region had disappeared, and there's a lot of, it was tough times in Eugene. So she was fighting the effects of that, trying to put into place jobs training programs and all these things, but she realized that was really just kind of treating the symptoms. And she wanted to try to go deeper and figure out how they could actually address the problem at the very root. So she created something called Buy Eugene. And I'm going to read you how Jane Jacobs described it in her book, Systems of Survival. Her idea was simple. Go to businesses and ask what they were planning to buy from outside the city and country or county in the coming year, and immediately see if there are local businesses capable of putting bids in for that work. In the meantime, while those searches were being made and bids prepared, visit more purchasers and start seeking potential suppliers for their items, and so on. In short, the program was to be made up as it went along. No expensive studies that would be obsolete as soon as they were finished. She put together a grant of $38,000 and tried the scheme out. And it turned out to be really successful, even though it was just such a simple idea. Oh, nice. And so Jane Jacobs wrote about this, and then this was really a big inspiration for us as well. And what Alana Probst said about this was that she wasn't just trying to treat what was going wrong, but she was trying to show what was possible. And what they ended up doing, you can measure the impact in, they created new contracts, they created, in 1 year, $500,000 of replaced imports. So they produced things locally rather than importing them. They created new jobs, they saved money for the local businesses. But she said what was really important was that they set an example of a community looking within for solutions to its economic problems and taking risks together. And so that's kind of the other part. Rather than just recirculating money locally, we realize that you can't just have a currency that will be a tool for buying with locally owned businesses. How can you use that as a tool for actually looking for the gaps in your local economy and identifying, because that's really what you come up against when you're trying to support a local economy. You realize there are so many things that are coming from outside. So how can you find those gaps, those things that you're importing, and then start to create them locally in a process that Jane Jacobs calls import replacement or import substitution. So that's what we've been working on lately in the Berkshires, because in the Berkshires we have a pretty strong local food movement. We are a rural area with a lot of agriculture, and it's kind of the epicenter of the community-supported agriculture movement, farm-to-table restaurants movement. But we really need to go beyond just food. We need to talk about how to process those vegetables into value-added products. We need to think about our forests that are immense resources that we're not really using in any community way. And there's so many other resources that we have that we haven't really even started thinking about. So this is kind of what our vision would be something rather than a supply chain, how can we have a supply loop? Those are my sheep down there and my wool. And so we could go from the soil to the animals, to the processing plant, to the designers, to the clothes, and back to the compost, back to the soil. And that's kind of what we're looking to create more of, rather than just the supply chain. I'm going to tell you about, I'm going to tell you about two experiments that we've been running in the last couple of years that are programs. They've developed into programs. So one of them is a series of workshops that we actually just did this past year. And this was an attempt because Berkshires are something that everybody can have in their wallet. That's really fundamental to the currency. We want to make sure that it's available, accessible, and can be in people's wallets. So it's basically a citizen-driven tool for community economic development. So when we're thinking about trying to think of local import substitution possibilities, we want to make sure that our whole community can have input to that. And so we ran this series of workshops with community partners from the northern Berkshires, all the way down to the southern Berkshires, with many different kinds of organizations, senior centers, young people, neighborhood organizations. And we asked the people in the workshops, we basically gave a short introduction. Here's what we're thinking about. Here's the idea of import replacement. Now it's up to you. What are some of the things that you think could be produced locally that are currently missing? We did a brainstorming session where we wrote down all these ideas. Basically, there was no bad idea. We put them all down. And then we had people vote on them so that they could see kind of what the people in the room were most interested in pursuing a little bit further. This is an example from Pittsfield, which is the main city in our county. And you can see there are some ideas that go back to old industries of the region, like stationery factory, paper making, and then applesauce. There are things like a micro mall where like many different ethnic food could be all in one place. So the ideas really ranged. There's also waste stream recycling ideas that could become businesses. And then we had groups work on them actually in the room. So it was like we developed a mini business plan sheet that's all in one sheet. And we made all of these people who came to our workshops into business planners. So we're not leaving it up to the one entrepreneur to come up with a business idea, do all the research, do all the planning, do all the funding. We're trying to figure out ways to spread all those responsibilities of entrepreneurship out across the community. And this is one way. So we created a rapid business build out. And each group, we took all those dot voting scores and we kind of looked at what are the most popular ideas. And the group agreed together, oh, well, we're going to work on these 4 ideas, or we're going to work on these 3 ideas. And then they broke up and each small group worked on one of those ideas and they filled out a business plan for that business idea. So if it was the applesauce factory, that didn't get any votes, so I guess they didn't do that one. But the commercial kitchen, the arts center focused on recycled art, and the micro mall, those got worked on. So basically people from the community, and they could be all different kinds. They could have no business background or lots of business background. They bring their own experience to the room and they use it in 20 minutes to write a mini business plan. And of course, these are not perfect business plans. They're not ready to go. But it's getting people involved in thinking about the opportunities and then what would it actually take to make it happen? What kind of community support would it take? And so that's kind of where we handed it off. So we collected all these business plans. They're available on the Berkshires website. And we're actually looking at we're trying to find more ways to get those ideas out there. We've had newspaper articles written about them and things like that. But we want to find out how those can become community resources for anybody who might want to start a business. So they're not starting from zero. They're starting from a little bit of already interest in the community. But this is actually the program that came first. Entry to Entrepreneurship is a business planning program for young people. And what we did this year is we took all of those ideas from the workshops and we handed them off to young people who were going to take this business planning program. And we said, here are some ideas from the community for businesses. Now, it's your job to write the business plan. And the way this business planning program worked is we started off with with an introduction again to the local economy and the idea of import replacement. And we started the students off, rather than starting them with, hey, what's your passion? What's your business going to be? We said, well, what's needed in our community? We want you to start a community-based business. And we're here to help you write a business plan, and we're going to put a lot of resources into you to help you do that. But we'd like you to start from the community perspective rather than your ego perspective, to think about that business idea. So that's kind of how we start them off. And the reason we originally started this program is also for that, the same reason we had those workshops. We want to include the whole community, and we realize that you need to spread the responsibilities and risk and all the work of being a community entrepreneur. We need to spread that out some more, because if we just leave it up to the individual to start that business, that's a lot of risk and time and work that kind of hampers community economic development, because that will keep a lot of people from starting that business. So how can we spread those responsibilities out and share in that work and make those businesses successful? So that's why we started Entry to Entrepreneurship. We wanted to give young people the tools to start a business and structure some support for them so that they might be more successful. So it's a business planning program for young people aged 14 to 25. We've just finished our 3rd year, and our class we've graduated 5 students, 15 students, and 10 students in the last 3 years. And so it's very small. But what we've developed is a crowdsourced business planning program. So I'm the facilitator, but I don't teach every class because I don't have a background in business. We bring in experts from our community, so people who own businesses. This is the president of Lee Bank, the chair of the board, actually. He teaches a class on community banking and how to get a small business loan from a community bank. And so we bring in people like that to teach our students. And then we also kind of turn it around, and we give them Berkshires at the end. So there's kind of this full circle of support from our community for these young people. So the young people come, it's a free class. They only have to pay a registration fee of 25 Berkshires. And they end up with 200 Berkshires in their pocket. And along the way, they've created all these connections with local business people. But we always start them off with the idea of what could we be making locally that we currently are importing. And then we set them free to write their business plan. They come every week for 2 hours a week for a lesson, and then support from mentorship, from mentors. But another kind of aspect of this class that makes it different from your normal entrepreneurship class is that it's very public. So it's not that kind of, I'm going to the business development professional in my region, we're going to work on my business plan, we're going to figure out what my competitive edge is, and it's going to be secret, and I'm going to reap all the profits. Because this is a program where we're investing in young people, and our whole community has supported this program and made grants to make it happen. So we think that the benefits should be public as well. So the business plans are very public. We put them up on our website, and the students are encouraged to share them, and in fact they're required to share them at the end. I don't think I have a picture. Darn it. Well, so at the end they get up and they have to present their plans. So they go through 10 weeks of class, and then they get up and present to the public, to a full house, and they tell everybody what their plans are. So there's none of this secretive kind of, this is my plan, I'm going to make all the money from it. It's all the way through. It's crowd supported, and then it should benefit the public too. So in the end, they walk away with Berkshires in their pocket after they present their plans. So that we think of that as a symbol of our investment in them, but also as seed money for their business. So it kind of depends on the business. Some of them are like, would take a lot of money to start up, but some of them might take 200 Berkshires and they could get going. So we give them 200 Berkshires at the end, and they also learn about Berkshires throughout the program. So they kind of feel that. I think they really feel the investment, and they're aware that they're kind of like they're being invested in by our community, so they then learn how they can give back. And this is a picture of all of our mentors who participated along with our students this year. So our classroom, I like to say, ranges from age 13 to 85, I think. And And I think that's a big important part of it too, because we're creating all these connections throughout different generations so that, because basically if you're starting off as a young person, you wanted to start a business, you might not know who to talk to. You might not know to go to the Rotary meeting. You might not know to go to the business after hours event where, you know, you schmooze with all the other business people, you get new clients. But this kind of connection, along with the teachers who come in, the students start to feel more comfortable. And these are sometimes 13-year-olds, sometimes they're 27-year-olds, but no matter how old they are, usually they aren't that comfortable talking to bankers or, you know, having a conversation with a retired garment industry business owner. But this program allows them to start those connections, which I think will pay off. For example, Hank Ferlato, who's kind of in the middle, he basically wrote his students' plan because he was so enthusiastic. He couldn't even help himself. And he's following up with Jefferson every week to make sure that he's able to progress. He's calling up realtors and saying, like, do you have a space that's ready for a restaurant? And Jefferson is an immigrant from Colombia. And so Hank is like his translator, his supporter, his mentor, everything. And then other students like Keely on the very far left, she's really shy. And so she has two advocates. She has Jane and Lillian are both in there like advocating for her, checking up on her, saying, oh, I can make that connection for you. All those different connections. So I think that has been a huge part of it. But it's also one of the funny and one of the best parts of it is that the mentors get a huge amount out of it because they're sitting there, they're able to pass along their knowledge. Vito, who's in the very back in the middle, he was in the garment industry for like 50 years, started multiple businesses. He was kind of serial entrepreneur. And he's in Rotary. And he said that this was so valuable to him because he never thought he'd be able to pass along the knowledge that he had gained during his years in business. And this gives him an opportunity. He's sometimes pretty critical of the students because he's like, they don't really want to do it. They don't have the gumption. But then I think after a couple years of being a mentor, I think he's mellowed out a little bit. And he realizes they're only 14. They might not start it tomorrow. Although if he was 14, he might have started it. And so the other thing about this is that they're sitting in the classroom. All the mentors are in the classroom every week. So they learn about Berkshires. They learn about import replacement. They start getting ideas. And they realize that there are all these resources that are out there that they might not be plugged into if they're just playing golf or going to, you know, play cards at somebody's house. So it kind of pulls them back from retirement and engages them in a really strong way. And I think that's really what's been key about it is that it invites participation from everybody, not just people who are fans of Berkshires or not just people who care about the local economy. Lots of people care about kids. Scott was talking about that. It's like, this is a great way to get press, but it's also a great way to gain interest from older people. And they all, basically in the Berkshires, we're losing population, and our population is declining and aging quickly. So the conversation everywhere is how can we offer young people ways to make a living? How can we support them to live here? And how can we pass along our knowledge to the next generation and keep them here, basically, or bring them back to the Berkshires? And I think that this invites everybody to be a part of that, and along the way educates them about Berkshires and engages them in building their own local economy. But it also, I think, could be replicated other places. It didn't cost us very much to run this program. And it relies on a lot of distributed knowledge through all different people who exist in lots of different communities. People who are retired and have business knowledge exist all over, and it takes kind of a catalyst to get that going. But I think that this would be something that could happen in other places. So I encourage you to ask me questions, and we're happy to share what we can with you. Okay, so many questions. Do you guys want to?
I guess for the recording purposes. So what sort of institutional partnerships do you have? I mean, you got the president of the community bank to come in and run a course. are they willing to provide credit to these businesses after graduation, sort of thing?
That's really key, and I think that has been built in because of partially because we have long-term relationships with banks because of Berkshire's and other community economic experiments in the past. They were more willing to jump in with this, and they had some trust in our ability to pull it off. But I think that because we have all these mentors, we have all these teachers who come from businesses and who are on the board of the local chamber of commerce, like Phyllis right there. Is on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. All of these people are tied in, and they would be willing to go the extra mile to help out our young entrepreneurs. So this year is like the first year where people have really, where the students are kind of, a number of them are ready to go and want to go. Other years, the students have been too young, their businesses actually are already running, but they're very small scale, or they don't have an internet connection, or things like, there have been barriers. But this year, we have lots of mentors ready to go to support the students, and lots of students ready to go and try to start their businesses. So that's been really exciting. But we have the Rotarians supporting it, the Kiwanis Club. All the banks have funded the program. So we have a lot of institutional support from our local business, very traditional business community.
So the currency or the whole project is based on the county, on the country. And how was the situation before it? Then you started.
Well, Susan might talk more about that on Friday, but Schumacher Center is now 37 years old, and we've been in the Berkshires that whole time. So there have been many different experiments and projects in the Berkshires that I think have helped Berkshires to be successful and helped this to be successful, because there's this there's like a memory of many different local economy experiments, and there's this culture of support for local businesses. Community-supported agriculture in the United States started down the road from the Schumacher Center office. And so there's kind of a cultural knowledge of this, but it also, I think it resides in the community banks and the local businesses. I think people just naturally know the worth of locally owned businesses, and that has helped all these projects work, I think.
You offer also loans to members?
So right, we gave them the 200 Berkshires, which is a grant. But I think that our community banks, we have, when Dave Bruce, who teaches the class on community banking, when he comes in, he brings his whole commercial lending team. So all these guys wearing suits and ties come in, and the kids are like, oh my God. And then by the end, they all have their jackets off, and they're sitting around, and they're chatting with the kids. And like one of them says, oh, my grandmother ran my father ran a poultry processing facility. There was a young woman in our class this year who wanted to do that. He said, I have the machinery you need. So basically, because there's more knowledge, it's so public, there's knowledge of these ideas, then there's easy ways for people to get credit they need. But Berkshires, in the long run, we want to make productive loans available to businesses like these, or entrepreneurs like these. We're just not at that point now. Berkshires are only paper, yeah. So I can give you, you guys can pass these around. You had a question?
How many projects, how many business plans get implemented? This is the first question. And the second, what are the advantages of your crowdfunding over, let's say, Kickstarter?
Well, I think that Kickstarter is great too, and part of the great thing about that is that it's you can share it on Facebook, and that you can get the knowledge out there. It relies on the same principle that getting the knowledge of the business out to the community means that the community can support it more easily. And that's one of the original experiments that the Schumacher Center did, was called Share. It was a microcredit program where the community could put up savings accounts as collateral for loans that banks wouldn't ordinarily make. So it's kind of that same, but what they did was they got they got newspaper coverage of the business. And so that's kind of what we're going on. We're just saying, like, get the ideas out there, and people will want to support them if they're good ideas. And so so this year, I think that we had nine students graduate. I think 6 of them want to go ahead with their ideas. Maybe 3 of them have very feasible, doable ideas, and the other 3 aren't quite as easy to do. And those 3 that are feasible they have like probably too much support. They have like mentors calling them and emailing them all the time, and they're like, I have a day job, I can't do this. So I think that they're going to go. Then a couple other projects from the past couple of years haven't gotten going, but they have students who are dedicated to going with it. It's just like one thing or another has made it impossible so far. But the students were 13 and 14 when they took the class, so they have plenty of time.